What does Matt like to work with as a vocalist? When he's recording vocals, would he be the type of vocalist that would go, like, let's say 15, 20 minutes, take a break, 15, 20 minutes, or would he do like 2 hours straight? Where would he fall in those categories?
No, he'd do sort of long, long sessions. So, like I say, he'd have a room upstairs, and we'd be tracking drums, bass, and whatever we were doing in Studio One, or Studio Two, and then in Studio Three, Matt was upstairs, and it would be sort of we'd sort of get into the studio at 11 and have a chat and tell some jokes, and then we start work, and then maybe we'd see him at like, I don't know, 2 o'clock for lunch. He'd pop down and say what's going on, have listened to what we've been doing, and then maybe he'd pop back off, and then he'd come back at maybe like 6 o'clock with a finished vocal, just to pop that in, and there you go. That's he's amazing as a vocalist. He's like, he knows exactly what he wants to do. He's very good at decisions. There's not a lot of second guessing. Matt's very like, if there's a problem with something, you need to have a solution rather than just saying there's a problem with it. So he's just fantastic at what he does.
So I recently spoke with one of the producers from Soundgarden, and he said that when it came to Chris Cornell, Chris would like to be completely alone in the studio when he's recording vocals. Like, he would basically have everyone leave. What was Matt like? Was he a very private person when it came to recording vocals, or was he more open? Like, what was the vibe essentially?
Matt would generally track the vocals by himself, yeah. So yeah, he'd go off into the room and we'd set him up, and then he would just get on with it. You know what I mean? I think he finds that way it's a bit more efficient for him to, rather than to stop it and go, oh, can we just go to this bit and then do this bit? And it's much quicker for him to do it himself.
So when we're listening to the final tracks, are we hearing Matt's vocals comped together, or are those usually just like single takes?
No, there would be some comping. Yeah, it would have been.
And do you guys ever double his vocals, or is it usually like a single vocal?
It's usually single. Obviously, with choruses and other sections that need fattening up, it was doubled. But obviously, again, there's lots of backing vocals going on. So Chris does a lot of the backing vocals. Sometimes Matt would do them, and then Chris would double what Matt's done. Or sometimes Matt would do a whole bunch, and then Chris would track those, and we'd take Matt's out. So
interesting. But when it came particularly to Matt, were there any particular mics you like to use to record his vocals, or we use whatever was available essentially?
The first record I did with them, we did with the U67, which Matt's likes recording in that. And then when we did the second law, we had same 67, same chain, and we had a couple of other microphones up in the room that he was working in, because Matt was working in the room upstairs. So while we were tracking downstairs, Matt would be working upstairs like on his own.
Was it the same process more or less for the second law? Was it the same studio?
No. The second law we did at Air Studios in London. Mainly. Then we went over to America for a bit of it as well. So yeah, the Resistance, that was the album we did in Italy. After that, they moved out of Matt moved away from Italy, and then the studio just didn't. They mothballed it. I think everything came out of there.
I spoke recently with Mike Frazier, who did a lot of AC/DC's records.
Oh, okay,
yeah, and he said that when Brian Johnson would record vocals, he would actually hold the microphone and sing like he's live. Was there anything unique that Matt did when it came to like how he recorded vocals? Not even just technically, but just like anything he physically did that was different to you?
No, not really. He would just do his thing. You know what I mean? He, like I say, he'd get on with it himself. He was quite happy to sort of get on with it. It would generally be, I'd be in, set the sound up, make sure that everything was good. Headphones, do a run through, and then he'd be like, "Okay, bye then." So get them in. Cool. Anyway, all right, then I'll leave you to it. And so, yeah, I think he was sort of he performs in his own way, I guess. Yeah,
that's awesome.
And that's what it does it best. But yeah, I've heard lots of stories about people singing. I know Bono used to do everything with the 58 in the control room.
Oh yeah, okay. So I mean, what is like? I mean, I guess this is just a general question. If you could clarify for me, because I'm like, why would a vocalist want to record in a control room as opposed to an isolation booth? Wouldn't it be better in general just to do the isolation booth?
Some singers hate headphones. They can't pitch with them on. It does change. It's a different process. You know what I mean? They're used to monitors. They're used to hearing themselves in their head, like rather than with headphones on. It can be quite. It's a different process, and it does take sometimes a bit of learning to do that. So yeah, I think singers that are used to sort of just belting it and having monitors to listen to, It's just that they can feel more comfortable like that.
Hmm.
I mean, there were processes in the old days where you'd use a couple of oratones,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd put the orotone one of them out of phase,
Mm-hmm.
and then you do your vocals to that, and then once you've done all your takes, you would record the microphone you just record the speakers into the microphone, and then if you reversed phased the microphone that didn't have any singing and balanced it up, you'd cancel out the spill from the orotone, so you could cancel out the spill altogether. But yeah, that was back in the day, man. It's like
That's cool, man. That's cool.
With guitars, really, Matt has like the crazy setup of lots of. I think it was one point where we were running 4 amps, but all running from different sources, different pedals, and different things making up different stuff. And sometimes there was a delay going into 1 amp, and yeah, there's lots of different processes of making the sound. And obviously Matt's guitars as well. There's lots going on in those.
Yeah, that's cool. So
those fellas.
Were there any particular types of guitars that he liked to use, like any particular models, or would he use?
Yeah, it was all Mansons, all of his Mansons. But back then, he's got some other guitars. We were using it. We had a Strat as well that was a very old Strat. Mainly Mansons. There was a Telly, but then as from Second Law, there started to be a few more sort of like baritone, like 7 strings turning up and stuff like that, and got a bit more experimental. But it's mainly Mansons. And they're his guitars that he's had for forever.
What were the sessions like working with them? Like, how did they approach recording music from your experience?
The experience of recording Muse is amazing. Basically, they know what they're doing in the studio, and they are outstanding musicians. So it sort of all came together very quickly at the last minute, if you know what I mean. So I spent a lot of time working on drum sounds with Dom, because the room was very treated. There wasn't much excitement in there. So I spent a lot of time putting microphones in different places and sticking my head in between panels and stuff. The same with bass, because Chris has got like quite a big rig. So he has two different amps driving 2 different distortions, and then we also had like a bass amp doing just sort of classic bass sound, and then I think we ran another combo I think with that. So we had 4 sources, and we had to find places for them to work with separation. So we spent a good few days getting all that together, and then once we'd sorted out that and they sat in the room together and started playing, it was literally clicked within like 1 take. And that's when you realise a band, when 3 people that make a band, that's when you realise that there's something special about them, because as soon as they started playing together, it all just sounded like Muse. You know what I mean? It was great. They tracked in the same room.
Okay.
So we took drums, bass, and a guide guitar, and sometimes we had stuff on a Pro Tools session like guides, and they'd worked up some sort of demo stuff. So we were running that as well. No, we played everything together as a band. Sometimes we retracked the bass. Obviously, the guitar was generally sort of just there as a guide track, but sometimes we kept some of it. On that record, on the Resistance, it was all live takes.
Was it the same thing for the Second Law? Did you also record everything off the floor?
No, that was a bit more. They'd done a lot of work already in Pro Tools, so everything was sort of demoed. So that was a case of a bit more sort of laying stuff on top of the demos. So we tracked the drums on top and then bass. Yeah, that was slightly less altogether. There was still some playing together, but that was a bit more working off of already worked up Pro Tools sessions.
Interesting. So basically, you guys kept some of the actual files from the demos in the final releases?
Can't remember how much we kept of the demos. Yeah, there's no such thing as demos these days. You know what I mean?